Have you ever loved someone so deeply, but they never loved you the same way? You waited for their messages. You cared about their happiness. You made them a priority. But for them, you were just an option. One-sided love is one of the most painful emotional experiences a person can go through. Not because love is wrong, but because it is given to someone who never truly values it. And the hardest part? You keep hoping that one day they will realize your worth. But today, we're going to talk about the real truth about one-sided love. The truth most people refuse to accept. Love without return is one of the most emotionally draining experiences a person can go through because it involves giving your deepest feelings, attention, and care to someone who simply does not feel the same way about you. It often begins quietly, without any clear sign that things will become painful. At first, the affection feels genuine and hopeful. You admire the person, you think about them constantly, and you begin investing emotional energy into their presence in your life. Slowly, your feelings grow stronger, while their response remains distant or neutral. Yet instead of recognizing the imbalance early, many people continue giving more of themselves, believing that if they are patient enough, kind enough, or loyal enough, the other person will eventually notice their value and return the same love. In this situation, love becomes a one-directional flow of emotion. One person becomes the giver of attention, care, and effort, while the other becomes the silent receiver, who may appreciate the attention but does not feel the same emotional depth. The person who loves more often begins to prioritize the other person's happiness above their own. They make time whenever they are needed, they listen carefully to every problem, and they try to be emotionally available at all times. Over time, this devotion can turn into a habit where their entire emotional world revolves around someone who never truly committed to them in the first place. The imbalance becomes obvious to everyone except the person who is deeply in love, because their feelings make them hold on to the smallest signs of hope. Love without return also creates a dangerous emotional illusion. When someone is deeply attached, they start interpreting simple gestures as signs of hidden affection. A kind message, a moment of attention, or a brief conversation can feel like proof that the other person secretly cares. These small interactions become the fuel that keeps the hope alive, even when the overall behavior clearly shows a lack of romantic interest. The mind begins to fill the gaps with imagination, creating a narrative where the love is simply delayed rather than absent. This illusion allows the person to continue investing emotionally, believing that patience will eventually lead to the love they desire. The reality, however, is that love cannot grow from effort alone if the feeling is not mutual. Genuine affection develops naturally between two people who both feel a strong emotional connection. When that connection exists on only one side, the relationship becomes emotionally unbalanced. The person who loves more starts sacrificing their time, their peace of mind, and sometimes even their self-respect in the hope that their devotion will change the other person's feelings. They may become overly available, constantly adjusting their behavior to please the other person, or trying to become someone they think the other person would want to love. This constant emotional giving can slowly drain their confidence and make them question their own worth. Another painful aspect of love without return is the quiet loneliness it creates. Even though the person is emotionally invested in someone, they often feel deeply alone because their feelings are not shared. They may spend countless hours thinking about the person, wondering if they are doing something wrong or if they could somehow become more lovable. This emotional confusion can lead to self-doubt, where the person begins to believe that they are not enough or that something about them is unworthy of love. Instead of recognizing that the problem lies in the lack of mutual feelings, they internalize the rejection and blame themselves for the distance in the relationship. Emotional attachment often feels incredibly powerful because it is built not only on reality, but also on imagination, hope, and personal longing. When someone becomes emotionally attached to another person, their mind begins to create a deep connection that may not actually exist in the same way for the other person. This attachment grows through repeated thoughts, small interactions, and the emotional meaning we assign to someone's presence in our lives. A simple conversation, a kind gesture, or a moment of attention can slowly turn into something much larger in our minds. Over time, the person becomes important not just because of who they are, but because of what we believe they represent in our emotional world. The attachment begins to shape how we think, how we feel, and even how we see the future, often without us realizing that much of it is built on our own expectations rather than clear reality. When emotional attachment becomes intense, people often start confusing their feelings with proof of a genuine relationship. They believe that because they feel something so strongly, the connection must be real and meaningful for both sides. However, feelings alone do not define reality. A person can spend months or even years thinking about someone, caring deeply about them, and imagining a life with them, while the other person may simply see them as a friend, an acquaintance, or even just someone who is part of their daily routine. The emotional investment becomes one-sided, but the person who is attached may struggle to accept this because their feelings have already created a powerful narrative in their mind. One of the reasons emotional attachment can become so misleading is that people often fall in love with the idea of someone rather than the person themselves. Instead of seeing the individual clearly, they begin projecting their own desires, hopes, and expectations onto that person. They imagine what the relationship could become, how the person might eventually change, or how things might feel if their love were returned. These imagined possibilities can become stronger than the actual behavior of the person they are attached to. Even when reality shows clear signs of disinterest, distance, or lack of effort, the emotional attachment keeps convincing them that there is still something meaningful hidden beneath the surface. Another powerful element of emotional attachment is the way it magnifies small moments. A brief message, a smile, or a casual compliment can feel extremely significant to someone who is already emotionally invested. These small interactions are often interpreted as deeper signals of affection or interest. The mind begins to connect these moments together, forming a story where the other person secretly cares but has not yet fully expressed it. In truth, many of these moments may simply be normal acts of politeness or friendliness, but emotional attachment turns them into evidence that supports the hope of something more. As attachment grows stronger, reality often becomes harder to accept. The person may begin ignoring obvious signs that the connection is not mutual. They might overlook the lack of effort, the emotional distance, or the inconsistent behavior of the other person. Instead of stepping back and observing the situation clearly, they focus only on the moments that keep their hope alive. This selective perception allows the attachment to continue growing, even when the relationship itself remains undefined or emotionally unbalanced. The mind becomes invested in protecting the emotional story it has created, making it difficult to see the situation objectively. Over time, the gap between emotional attachment and reality can become deeply confusing. The person may feel completely connected on an emotional level, while the actual relationship shows little or no progress. They continue investing their thoughts, feelings, and time into someone who may never have intended to build the same level of connection. This disconnect between what is felt internally and what is actually happening externally can create a cycle of longing, hope, and misunderstanding that keeps the attachment alive far longer than the reality of the situation supports. Self-worth often becomes the first thing people sacrifice when they are deeply involved in one-sided love. At the beginning, most individuals have a clear sense of their value. They know the kind of respect, care, and attention they deserve from others. However, when strong feelings for someone develop and those feelings are not returned with the same intensity, a quiet shift begins to happen. Instead of maintaining their standards, people start adjusting themselves in order to keep the person they love close to them. They become more forgiving of behavior that would normally make them uncomfortable. And they slowly start tolerating situations that conflict with their sense of dignity. The desire to remain emotionally connected to someone becomes stronger than the need to protect their own self-respect. This process rarely happens all at once. It usually begins with small compromises that feel harmless in the moment. A delayed reply is excused, a cancelled plan is ignored, or a lack of effort is rationalized as the other person being busy or stressed. Over time, these small compromises accumulate and gradually reshape the way a person views their own worth. Instead of expecting equal effort and mutual care, they start feeling grateful for the smallest signs of attention. A simple message or brief conversation begins to feel like something valuable, even though such basic communication should be normal in any balanced relationship. The standards that once protected their emotional well-being slowly become weaker as the attachment grows stronger. When self-worth is ignored in this way, people often begin changing parts of themselves to gain approval from the person they love. They may adjust their behavior, interests, or personality in hopes of becoming more appealing. Instead of being authentic, they try to become the version of themselves they believe the other person would appreciate. This constant effort to reshape themselves can create a deep internal conflict because the person is no longer acting according to their natural identity. They are performing a role designed to earn affection rather than living with confidence in who they already are. Over time, this effort can lead to emotional exhaustion because maintaining a version of yourself that is built around someone else's preferences requires constant self-monitoring and doubt. Another consequence of ignoring self-worth is the way people start accepting emotional neglect. When someone becomes deeply attached, they may tolerate being treated as an option rather than a priority. They wait patiently for attention, adjust their schedule to accommodate the other person, and remain available even when the same level of effort is not returned. Instead of recognizing this imbalance as unhealthy, they convince themselves that their patience and loyalty will eventually be rewarded. They believe that if they continue showing love and understanding, the other person will finally recognize their value and begin treating them differently. This belief allows the imbalance to continue, even though the behavior of the other person rarely changes in meaningful ways. Ignoring self-worth can also affect how people see themselves internally. When their love is not returned, they often begin questioning their own value. They wonder if they are not attractive enough, interesting enough, or good enough to be loved in the way they desire. Instead of recognizing that attraction and emotional connection cannot be forced, they internalize the rejection and turn it into self-criticism. This self-doubt slowly weakens their confidence and makes them even more willing to accept less than they deserve, because they begin to believe that they are fortunate to receive any attention at all. As this pattern continues, the relationship dynamic becomes increasingly unbalanced. One person invests emotional energy, time, and care, while the other remains distant or inconsistent. The person who is deeply attached may continue justifying the situation, telling themselves that love requires patience, sacrifice, and understanding. What they fail to notice is that healthy love does not demand the abandonment of self-respect, nor does it require someone to constantly prove their worth in order to receive basic emotional consideration. Hope is often seen as a beautiful and powerful emotion, something that keeps people strong during difficult times and encourages them to believe that things will eventually get better. In many situations, hope provides motivation and emotional strength. However, in the context of one-sided love, hope can slowly transform into the biggest illusion a person holds onto. When someone deeply loves another person who does not return those feelings, hope becomes the thread that keeps them emotionally attached. Instead of accepting what is clearly visible in the other person's behavior, they begin to rely on the possibility that things might change someday. This possibility becomes stronger than the reality in front of them, creating a mental space where the relationship exists more in imagination than in truth. At the beginning, hope feels harmless. A person might believe that the other individual simply needs more time to recognize their feelings. They may think that circumstances are currently preventing the relationship from developing, or that the other person is unaware of how deeply they are loved. These thoughts allow them to stay emotionally invested because they feel that the situation is temporary rather than permanent. Every small interaction begins to feed this belief. A friendly conversation, a smile, or a moment of attention becomes interpreted as a sign that something deeper might eventually grow. Even when these moments are brief or casual, they are remembered and replayed in the mind as proof that the connection is slowly moving in the right direction. Over time, hope begins to reshape the way a person interprets reality. Instead of observing the situation objectively, they focus only on the details that support their belief that love will eventually be returned. Signs of distance, disinterest, or lack of commitment are minimized or ignored entirely. If the other person cancels plans, they assume there must be an important reason. If messages are short or delayed, they believe the person must simply be busy. Each explanation protects the hope they are holding on to, even when the pattern of behavior clearly shows a lack of romantic interest. The mind becomes skilled at creating justifications that keep the illusion alive. This form of hope can become emotionally addictive because it creates temporary moments of excitement and anticipation. When the person they love shows even a small amount of attention, it feels like progress. That small moment becomes enough to restore their belief that patience will eventually lead to the relationship they desire. The emotional high from these brief interactions can be powerful, making it difficult to step back and see the overall pattern. Instead of evaluating the relationship based on consistent effort and mutual interest, they judge it based on isolated moments that appear to confirm their hopes. As the illusion grows stronger, the person may invest more time, energy, and emotional effort into someone who has never shown the same level of commitment. They continue waiting, believing that their loyalty and persistence will eventually be rewarded. Days turn into months, and sometimes even years, while they remain emotionally tied to the possibility of a future that may never exist. The hope that once felt comforting slowly becomes the reason they remain trapped in a situation that does not fulfill their emotional needs. Instead of allowing them to move forward and seek a relationship where love is mutual, the illusion of future happiness keeps them standing still, holding on to the belief that one day the person they love will finally see what has always been in front of them. Silent rejection is one of the most painful experiences a person can go through in matters of the heart, because it rarely comes with a clear explanation or a definite ending. Unlike direct rejection, where someone openly expresses that they do not share the same feelings, silent rejection unfolds slowly and quietly through behavior, distance, and emotional absence. The person who is deeply in love is left in a confusing space where nothing is clearly stated, yet everything is subtly communicated. There are no harsh words, no final conversation that closes the chapter, only a gradual pattern of indifference that becomes harder to ignore with time. This uncertainty makes the pain more complicated because the person experiencing it is constantly searching for clarity that never truly arrives. When rejection is silent, it often appears in small actions that seem insignificant at first. Messages become shorter or less frequent, plans are rarely initiated, and emotional warmth slowly fades into polite distance. The person who is emotionally invested notices these changes, but instead of immediately accepting them as signs of rejection, they often try to explain them away. They tell themselves the other person must be busy, distracted, or going through something difficult. This effort to rationalize the behavior allows hope to survive a little longer, even when the pattern clearly shows a lack of genuine interest. Each moment of distance feels confusing because it is not strong enough to be called rejection, yet it is consistent enough to create emotional discomfort. One of the most painful aspects of silent rejection is the way it keeps a person emotionally suspended between hope and disappointment. Because nothing has been openly stated, they continue believing that there might still be a chance for things to change. This uncertainty can keep them emotionally attached far longer than they would remain in a situation where the truth had been directly spoken. They wait for a sign, a conversation, or some moment of clarity that will explain the distance they feel. However, that clarity rarely arrives, leaving them stuck in a cycle of questioning their own perceptions and wondering if they are misinterpreting the situation. Silent rejection also has a way of affecting a person's confidence and self-perception. Without a clear explanation, the mind naturally begins searching for reasons within itself. The person may start wondering if they did something wrong, said something that pushed the other person away, or somehow failed to be enough. Because there is no direct communication, these doubts grow freely, often becoming much harsher than the reality of the situation. The silence leaves space for imagination, and that imagination can turn ordinary misunderstandings into deeply personal insecurities. Another painful element of silent rejection is the loneliness it creates. The person who is experiencing it may still be communicating with the one they love, yet the emotional connection feels distant and hollow. Conversations may continue, but they lack warmth and depth. The person who once felt special now feels like an afterthought, someone who is present but not truly valued. This quiet shift in the dynamic can feel deeply isolating because the relationship still exists on the surface, yet the emotional closeness that once gave it meaning has slowly disappeared. Over time, silent rejection becomes a constant emotional weight that is carried in everyday life. The person continues interacting with someone who does not openly reject them, but also does not genuinely choose them. Each interaction becomes a reminder of the imbalance, creating moments of sadness that are difficult to explain to others. The absence of clear closure makes the experience linger longer, leaving the person with unanswered questions and a lingering sense of emotional loss that grows heavier with every unspoken signal of distance. Learning to walk away from one-sided love is one of the most difficult emotional decisions a person can make because it requires letting go of someone who once meant everything to them. When feelings are deep and attachment has grown over time, the idea of stepping away can feel almost impossible. People often hold on to the hope that things will eventually change, believing that their patience, loyalty, and emotional effort will someday be recognized. The thought of walking away can feel like giving up on something meaningful, even when the relationship has never truly developed in a mutual way. This emotional conflict creates a powerful struggle between what the heart wants and what reality continues to show. At first, many people resist the idea of leaving because they have already invested so much of themselves into the connection. They remember the moments that made them feel close, the conversations that seemed meaningful, and the small gestures that once gave them hope. These memories become the emotional anchors that keep them attached to the person, making it difficult to accept that the connection is not what they believed it to be. The mind begins to replay these positive moments repeatedly, convincing them that something real once existed and could return again if they just wait a little longer. Letting go of this belief means accepting that the relationship may never become what they imagined, and that realization can feel deeply painful. Another challenge in learning to walk away is the fear of losing someone who has become emotionally important. Even if the love was never fully returned, the presence of that person in everyday life can create a sense of comfort and familiarity. Their messages, their attention, and their occasional kindness may have become part of a daily routine. The idea of removing that person from one's emotional world can create a sense of emptiness, as if something meaningful will be missing. Because of this fear, many people remain in one-sided situations far longer than they should, choosing the pain of uncertainty over the discomfort of separation. However, the process of walking away often begins when a person slowly recognizes the emotional imbalance in the relationship. They start noticing how much effort they have been giving compared to how little they receive in return. They realize that their happiness has been tied to someone who has never truly prioritized them. This awareness can be uncomfortable at first because it forces them to confront the truth they may have been avoiding. Yet it is also the moment when self-respect begins to reappear. Instead of focusing only on their feelings for the other person, they begin reflecting on how the situation has affected their own emotional well-being. As this awareness grows, the decision to walk away becomes less about losing someone and more about protecting oneself. The person starts understanding that love should not require constant chasing or endless waiting. They begin to see that genuine relationships are built on mutual interest, shared effort, and emotional balance. This realization shifts their perspective from trying to win someone's affection to valuing their own emotional peace. Walking away then becomes an act of self-preservation rather than defeat, a step toward creating space for healthier connections in the future. Even though the decision to leave may be clear in the mind, the emotional process of letting go still takes time. Feelings do not disappear instantly, and memories do not fade overnight. The person may still think about the one they loved, wonder what could have been, or feel moments of sadness when reminded of the connection they once hoped for. These emotions are a natural part of the healing process, reflecting the depth of the attachment that once existed. The act of walking away is not about pretending the love was never real, but about recognizing that real love should never require someone to remain in a place where their feelings are constantly unreturned and their presence is quietly taken for granted. In the end, the reality of one-sided love is not just about loving someone who does not love you back. It is about the emotional journey a person goes through while trying to hold onto a connection that was never truly mutual. It begins with deep feelings, hope, and the belief that love, patience, and effort can eventually change someone's heart. But as time passes, that hope often turns into confusion, self-doubt, and emotional exhaustion. a person starts ignoring the signs, lowering their standards, and sacrificing their self-worth just to keep someone in their life who was never fully present to begin with. One-sided love teaches a painful but powerful lesson about reality. Love cannot be forced, convinced, or earned through endless effort. It must exist naturally between two people who genuinely choose each other. When love is real, it does not leave you constantly questioning your importance or waiting endlessly for someone to recognize your value. It grows through mutual care, shared effort, and emotional balance. Without these elements, what feels like love can slowly turn into attachment, illusion, and silent rejection. The hardest truth to accept is that sometimes the person you love will never see you the way you see them, and holding on to that hope for too long can prevent you from seeing your own worth. Walking away from one-sided love does not mean your feelings were meaningless. It simply means you are choosing to stop investing your heart in a place where it is not valued the way it deserves to be. It is the moment when you begin to understand that love should never require you to lose yourself. Real love will never make you feel like an option. It will not keep you guessing, waiting, or begging for attention. The right connection will bring clarity, respect, and emotional security. And sometimes, the most important step toward finding that kind of love is having the courage to let go of the one that was never truly yours.